They called me a dropout, a failure, said I couldn't handle discipline, couldn't stomach orders, couldn't survive structure. At every holiday dinner, they toasted my younger sister's military promotions and looked right through me. To them, I was the shadow of a once promising cadet who cracked under pressure. They didn't know I'd walked away not out of weakness, but because the truth doesn't always wear a uniform. My name is Cassidy Rourke, and the only reason they never saw what I became is because I was never meant to be seen. They said I didn't belong in uniform, so I built a war without one. It was a blistering morning in New Mexico when I showed up to the training yard, just another face in the visiting crowd. Tactical slacks, black windbreaker, visitor's badge clipped to my chest. Neutral, invisible, deliberate. I kept my gaze steady on the cadets moving in unison, their boots striking rhythm on red dirt. My sister, Kara, barked commands with all the intensity of a rising lieutenant. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, and refused to acknowledge the disappointment seated 3 rows back. Then it happened. The drill instructor, Sergeant Mason Frey, stopped mid-circuit. His eyes locked on mine. 1 heartbeat, 2. He marched straight toward me, sharp, deliberate. Each step echoed like a verdict. Whispers rustled through the bleachers as cadets slowed, then froze. And then he saluted. "Commander Rourke, ma'am, I wasn't informed you'd be observing today." The world fell silent. The sun still burned, but the air went cold. Kara's voice caught in her throat. Her hands, once firm on her training rifle, trembled. The metal slipped, a dull clatter on the concrete. Heads turned, mouths hung open, and I said, with all the calm of someone used to being underestimated, "At ease, Sergeant. I'm off duty. Keep this quiet." But the room was already burning with questions. That was the moment everything shifted, not just for Kara, but for the family that thought I had disappeared. They didn't realize I hadn't vanished. I had gone dark, and now the shadows were stepping into the light. The message came in like a directive, not an invitation. "Come home Sunday. Celebration for Kara. Wear something normal." No, "We miss you." No, "How have you been?" Just instructions, like I was still 19 and under their roof. I hadn't stepped foot in that house in almost 7 years. Not since the night I walked out without slamming the door, knowing the silence would echo louder than any final word. But I showed up anyway. Not for them, for Kara. The driveway was still cracked at the edges. The porch light still flickered like it couldn't make up its mind, and the mailbox still leaned to the left, just like my father's politics and my mother's chin whenever she disapproved of anything. Inside, the scent of baked ham and too much cinnamon clung to every corner. The dining room was dressed like a military awards banquet. Banner with Kara's name, printed programs, even a slideshow looping photos of her boot camp graduation. Kara in uniform, Kara on stage, Kara with a crisp salute, not one picture of me. I wore a plain gray blouse and black slacks, nothing fancy, nothing statement-worthy, just enough to pass as a shadow. And still, I could feel the judgment pressing in from all sides like humidity. Dad was the first to speak. He didn't hug me, didn't even stand. "So what are you doing these days?" he asked, eyes already drifting back to the slideshow. Before I could answer, he launched into Kara's recent promotion, field scores, top 10% of her class. My mother nodded proudly, glass in hand. My Aunt Kendra smirked from the buffet table and said, "Didn't you used to play waitress at Applebee's? Looks like it stuck." A few polite chuckles followed. I smiled, measured, precise. "I'm better at serving now," I said, voice cool. It landed the way I wanted, soft and sharp at the same time. Then came the moment they always slipped in like clockwork. The casual dismissal. "Cass, can you grab some extra forks from the kitchen?" someone asked. "And water, table's empty." No one else moved. No one asked if I minded. It was assumed I would, that I should. So I went. I fetched the forks, poured the water, listened to Kara's laughter drift through the hallway. I saw her face lit up by admiration, not knowing I'd once led units in silence while she learned to march. When I came back, there was no chair for me. All the name cards were set, every seat taken. My mother blinked at me like I'd surprised her by existing. "There's a folding chair on the porch. By the grill," she said. "You can sit there." So I did. Out on the porch, with the wind brushing my ankles and the smell of propane in the air, I sat quietly, unseen. But not for long. They all thought I crumbled, that the girl who walked out of ROTC sophomore year had fallen apart and never got back up. They weren't entirely wrong. Back then, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I'd sit in the corner of the rec room, fingers locked so tight they'd leave crescent moons in my palms. Panic attacks felt like betrayals my own body launched without warning. I told no one, not even Kara. Especially not Kara. The breaking point came during a night drill. I froze. My commanding officer called me civilian material, and the room laughed. I packed my bags before dawn. A week later, I walked into a different office, handed over every ID I had, and signed a contract I wasn't legally allowed to keep a copy of. They called it the Echo Civilian Defense Program. Unlisted, unacknowledged, operated under civilian intelligence jurisdiction, deep, silent, necessary. The kind of unit they assign to operations too sensitive for public records, but too vital to ignore. From that day forward, Cassidy Rourke ceased to exist in every searchable system. I didn't vanish. I was erased. The missions weren't glamorous. No parades, no medals, just briefings in windowless rooms, field gear that never fit quite right, and the constant knowledge that if I got caught, no one would come looking. But I excelled. Not because I was brave, but because I had no need to be seen. I learned to disappear in plain sight. I spoke 7 dialects by year 3. My hair color changed with seasons. My tone adjusted to every region. I became useful, efficient, trusted, but never fully known. The last mission I led before transitioning into strategy left a scar just above my right shoulder blade. A reminder that even ghosts can bleed. When I turned 36, they pulled me from field ops and embedded me in cross-branch command structure. Strategic operations, data coordination, pattern analysis. In short, I became the person who sees the map before the moves. And yet, back at my parents' table, they thought I was a server. Someone who never finished anything. A cautionary tale they referenced when Kara struggled. Don't pull a Cassidy. That night, sitting on that cold metal chair by the grill, I got the alert. A single vibration on the secure device I kept stitched into the lining of my coat. The kind no one would mistake for a phone. I slipped it out, turned the screen. Observer assignment issued. Echo Protocol. Fort Garnet. Initiate passive assessment. Contact not required. I smiled. I wasn't back home because I missed them. I was back because the world they thought I had no place in, it still needed me. And now, I had business at the very base where Kara trained. Fort Garnet was already awake when I arrived. Morning drills rang across the desert like a war hymn, boots pounding into dust, voices sharp with discipline. I parked in the civilian lot, far enough not to attract attention, but close enough to feel the weight of routine snap through the air. Every movement had precision, every face, purpose. I moved through the south gate with my clearance badge tucked neatly into a side pocket. No rank, no affiliation, just a serial code that only 3 people on base could decrypt. As far as the guards were concerned, I was just another analyst on rotation. Kara's unit was in formation on the lower range, their silhouettes crisp against the rising sun. She stood near the front, arms firm behind her back, chin lifted the way cadets are taught to signal confidence. And still, she didn't see me. But he did. Sergeant Mason Frey, infamous for breaking a recruit's ego in under 3 minutes, was stalking the formation, barking cadence. His voice cracked like a whip. Recruits snapped to attention as he passed. Boots locked, spine straight. Then, mid-stride, he stopped. His head turned slightly, eyes narrowing across the observation bleachers. Right at me. There was no recognition in his face at first, just calculation. Then something shifted. His posture stiffened. His boots pivoted. In front of 50 trainees and half a dozen instructors, Sergeant Frey marched toward me, cutting through the morning like a blade. The bleachers fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. When he stopped just 2 feet from me, he didn't speak at first. He saluted. "Commander Rourke, ma'am, I wasn't informed you'd be observing today." The weight of that title landed like a dropped rifle. Kara turned, her brows furrowed, her lips parted just slightly, then her fingers slipped. The training rifle she'd been holding clattered to the ground, loud and metallic. Someone whispered near her, "Wait, her sister's a commander?" I didn't flinch. "I'm off duty," I said evenly. "No announcement necessary. Continue as ordered." Sergeant Frey nodded. Not a word more. He turned cleanly, boots slicing the dirt, and returned to formation. But the drills didn't resume right away. The silence stayed. Kara stared straight ahead, unmoving, unreadable. Eyes flicked toward me, like I was a myth come to life, a phantom with rank. I stayed only 15 minutes longer, just enough time for whispers to bloom into rumors. By the time I left through the side gate, I knew what would happen next. Echoes would ripple through the base, questions would spark, files would be searched, and Kara Ellery, rising star, golden daughter, would have to ask herself, who was I really? That night, Kara didn't sleep. I knew because I'd seen that expression before. The twitch in the jaw, the vacant eyes that didn't blink enough. It's what happens when the world tilts, and nothing lines up the way you were taught it should. They told her I dropped out. They never told her I disappeared on purpose. In the barracks, while her bunkmate snored, Kara finally reached for the old gym bag I'd handed her last year. Back then, I'd passed it off like it held spare clothes and maybe a few snacks from my last road trip. She never bothered to look. Until now. She found it in the side pocket, a flat, brushed steel drive the size of a playing card. No markings, no branding, just a faint grid etched into one side. It hummed faintly when she picked it up. Her fingers hovered over her tablet. She connected it. The screen blinked. Access request. Echo terminal clearance. Civilian proxy. She froze. What the hell was Echo? She hesitated, then logged in using her cadet credentials. Low-level clearance, limited permissions. Enough to open a window, not a door. The screen stuttered. Text scrolled too fast to catch. Then came one line, pulsing white letters against black. Access logged. Oversight alert triggered. Then it went dark. No warning, no menu, just black. Kara yanked the drive out, heart pounding, unsure if she'd just stumbled into a training simulation or something much bigger. Meanwhile, across base, I was already wide awake. My secure line buzzed like a nerve hit raw. Unauthorized breach. Internal node ping, Rourke A1. I sat up instantly. That tag had been retired, buried. It wasn't linked to any current system, and yet someone had activated it from inside Fort Garnet. Only 2 people on Earth still had physical access to that drive. One of them was me. The other was my sister. At 2:43 a.m., I was at the Command Coordination Suite, seated across from Major Evelyn Shaw, the coldest analyst in the Southwestern Division. She slid a datapad across the table. "Commander Rourke," she said, "we've traced the signal. It triggered a proximity lock on classified material tied to a black ops shell. Someone used a legacy clearance path." I didn't blink. "It wasn't me." "That's what worries me," she replied. She didn't ask permission. She issued me a 48-hour trace directive, full diagnostic access. Silent flag, no official report. Yet. I already knew what I'd find. Back in my quarters, I decrypted the metadata manually. Scrubbed, sloppy. But I recognized the device signature, the steel drive, the one I'd slipped into Kara's bag. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't just found a drive. She'd stepped on a tripwire, one that had been waiting years to go off. I didn't go to Kara's barracks. I had her brought to the operations wing, windowless, silent, sterile. She walked in looking like a model cadet, shoulders locked, jaw set, not a hair out of place. But when she saw me, then Sergeant Frey, her composure wavered. I pointed to the chair. "Sit." She obeyed. No hesitation. But I saw her grip tighten on the edge of the seat. "You don't have to explain yet," I said. "But you do need to understand." I held up the drive she'd accessed. "That wasn't a training file. That's a federal security node tied to Echo operations. What you triggered was designed to catch foreign actors, not curious sisters." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to." "I know. But meaning doesn't undo damage. She dropped her gaze, ashamed. You have any idea what you touched? I asked quietly. She shook her head. That drive is linked to a program that doesn't exist on record. It connects to files that, if pulled, could expose agents still in field. You didn't open a door. You kicked a hole in a wall that was meant to stay sealed. She looked up. You're really... all of this? I didn't answer. She whispered, Why didn't you ever tell me? Because surviving sometimes requires silence, especially when no one ever asked. Sergeant Frey folded his arms. If she screws this up, Commander, both of you are finished. I nodded. I'm aware. Then I looked at her. I'm not reporting you. Her eyes widened. Why? Because you're going to help fix this. She hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, like someone reaching for something they were never taught to hold. And just like that, we weren't sisters at odds anymore. We were co-conspirators in a storm neither of us started, but both of us had to finish. We started with the logs. Kara sat beside me, quiet, scanning line after line of access pings while Sergeant Frey stood behind us like a statue. The breach hadn't gone deep, just enough to wake something that was never meant to stir again. Then I saw it. A file signature buried inside a legacy server. 5 years old, masked, mislabeled, tucked into a rarely used backup node. The encryption pattern was familiar. Too familiar. I stiffened. Curtis Vaughn. Kara blinked. Who? Former civilian contractor. Led tactical interface development on Echo simulations. He was removed after I flagged a series of unauthorized code injections. Frey frowned. Thought he vanished. He did, I said. But not before embedding traps. Dormant scripts designed to activate if someone stumbled into his digital graveyard. Kara's face paled. You didn't trigger a breach, I told her. You stepped on a landmine he buried years ago. She whispered, So this wasn't random? Not even close. We sat in silence as the truth settled. Vaughn had waited, buried his code where only someone like Kara, young, curious, too close to me, might wander into it. And now, with my old clearance pinging the system, he had everything he needed to make me look like a traitor. He wanted me exposed, I said quietly, and you gave him the perfect door. Kara didn't argue. She just nodded. Then she whispered, Let's close it. The tribunal chamber felt more like a courtroom than a briefing room. Wood paneling, tight rows of chairs, and a silence that pressed against the ribs. Curtis Vaughn stood calmly behind the podium, dressed like a civilian, but still reeking of controlled arrogance. He held up a printed report and pointed to a redacted paragraph. This, he said, documents Commander Rourke's failure to report civilian casualties during Operation Halberd. His voice was clinical. Rehearsed. The implication was simple. I'd covered up deaths to protect my reputation. The presiding colonel turned to me. Commander? I didn't flinch. I reached into my folder and handed over a laminated copy of Vaughn's original directive. His name, his timestamp, his authorization to clear a perimeter, without intel confirmation. He gave the order, I said, then cut the comm line to make sure there'd be no objections. There was a pause. Then Sergeant Frey stepped forward and requested permission to play audio. It crackled through the speakers. My voice from 5 years ago, firm, clear. Hold fire. Possible civilian presence. Wait for recon confirmation. No one moved. No one breathed. And then Kara stood. In her hands was the access log Vaughn had triggered 2 years prior, operating under a fake contractor ID. He didn't just sabotage the system, she said. He tried to rewrite history. That was the moment the silence changed. Not tense, but reverent. For once, the truth didn't need to shout. It stood tall on its own. They cleared me without fanfare. My clearance was restored, my rank reinstated. But I didn't ask for recognition. They offered a public statement, a speech, a permanent record, with my name etched beside the operation I refused to let destroy others. I declined. If being seen means others pay the price, I said, then I'll stay where they don't have to. Later that evening, Kara found me at the airstrip. No medals, no pomp, just a simple silver badge pinned to her chest. A symbol not of rank, but of quiet leadership. She pressed it into my palm. I don't want to wear it, she said. I want to deserve it. I didn't reply, just pulled her in, held her tighter than I had in years. Before I boarded the jet, I left her a letter in her locker. Just one line. If you ever forget who you are, start here. And as I rose into the dark sky, I carried no weight of legacy, only peace.